My regrets and my certainly my condolences to everyone in the family of Kevin Kamenetz, our Baltimore County executive who passed in the overnight. I have many people very close to Kevin, as close as you can imagine, and our hearts and prayers and thoughts go out to everybody there with Kevin in the aftermath of this tragedy for Baltimore County, where WNST resides, and I'm sure it'll be on your timeline and your social media throughout the day on Thursday. But keep Kevin in your thoughts, certainly, as we try to pick up those pieces. The Orioles picked up the pieces on Wednesday night and had a rare victory. Luke Jones was on the scene at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. And, I noticed that Buck Showalter did not pick out the post-game music, but at least referenced it in the post-game that any win is a good win at this point. And certainly, when Cashner takes the ball, Luke, you feel like you have a chance to win. He's a big league pitcher.
Yeah, and overall, I mean, the numbers haven't been great, and he certainly had his issues with the long ball, but overall, he's given them competitive outings. And I think when you look at where he was last year, you looked at the peripherals, we looked at the fact that he signed after the start of spring. He's given them about what I thought he could under a reasonable, relatively positive scenario. He hasn't been great. I mean, his ERA's just south of 5 because he has had a couple starts that were rough. But he's given them some solid outings, and Wednesday night was a solid outing for him, especially when you consider your bullpen had to cover 9 innings the previous night. So it's nothing earth-shattering. It's a win. We knew this team would win some games at some point. I still expect them to play better at some point. That doesn't mean they're climbing out of this incredibly massive hole they've dug themselves over the first 6 weeks of the season.
I didn't think 8 and 154 was going to, I didn't think they were going to set that record.
Yeah, and I'm still not expecting them to lose 120 games, which is about the pace they're on right now. I think they're going to play better at some point. Is this the start of it? Who knows? But for one night anyway, as I said to you as we kind of began our discussion, they actually resembled a Major League Baseball team. And even with the scope error in the 9th inning, which obviously you didn't want to see, they actually played pretty good defense up to that point, made a number of nice plays in the field. So it's nice to get a win, especially when you were winless in the month of May. And now you see if you can, dare I say, win back-to-back games for the first time in over a month. They've done that once all year. And to quote Lou Brown from Major League Two, you win another one after that, it's called a winning streak. It has happened before.
Well, I was going to say I've already had fun with the streak is at 1 right now. So, 1 is a streak when you can't win a game. But, I guess for the team at this point, the Chris Davis thing becomes something we're all going to watch because, dude, he's going to be the last guy standing. I mean, I can't promise you much about the 2020 Orioles, but I know that the Orioles are going to be paying him, $25 to $30 million right around that point. And I don't know whether he's going to be on the team or not, but he would be the one guy that we should all be looking at because Machado ain't going to be here to look at anymore. The future still involves Chris Davis, and getting him to some semblance of being able to hit 238 and maybe hit 28 home runs would be where you want to take it with him because you're not going to quit on him and you're going to give him 5 at-bats a night.
Yeah, that's why I've kind of said for a number of weeks, even going back to last year, this idea of trying to get rid of him at this point, whether it's via trade or just cutting him outright, I mean, it's a
getting rid of him. Anybody that's talking about that just has their head up their ass.
Well,
it's not even. It's like calling Rex Barney in 1994 and trying to make some trade. I mean, Chris Davis is untradeable, unmovable. I would think he's the most unmovable contract in the sport, literally, right?
I would say that's completely correct.
Yeah, so that's that's off the table. So it's either play him or or no, don't play him.
Right, and even the notion of letting him go is still, to me, 2 years down the road before that conversation is.
That's why I said 2020. I think they'll fake an injury and have him sit around for a month before they would do any of that kind of stuff, right?
But to your point, I mean, you're going to be paying this guy regardless, and I understand the frustration. I mean, believe me, I'm watching him every night just like everyone else. I see what the numbers are, even with him hitting home runs in back-to-back nights. I mean, he's still slugging .294. He has a .269 on-base percentage. Has he looked a little bit better over the last week? Well, we're seeing him try to go the other way a little bit. I think the approach has looked a little bit better at times, and then other times it looks like what we've been seeing. So I don't think there's any bold proclamation here that he's found something other than the fact that he's hit a home run in back-to-back games. But this is why I spoke yesterday when we were talking about Dylan Bundy, and clearly there were a lot of people on social media, a lot of national types poking fun at the fact that he gave up 4 home runs without retiring a batter. But these are the guys that you're talking about that are going to be here for the foreseeable future. I mean, it's one thing to talk about. Machado we're not talking about in negative terms, but it's one thing to talk about Pedro Alvarez kicking the ball around at third base or Chris Tillman not being able to get anyone out. Those types of guys aren't going to be here, probably beyond this year.
Well, they shouldn't be there now. I mean, Chris Tillman shouldn't be there. Pedro Alvarez should never be standing on third base unless it's on, circle the bases day with his kids or something.
But my point is, as these day-to-day games have become far less consequential to the point where it really doesn't matter other than the fact that, it's nice to win a game. You'd like to win a few more.
Reminds me of meatballs, dude. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, though.
But my point is, when you're talking about guys like Bundy and Gausman and Trey Mancini and Chris Davis, who doesn't really fit the mold in the same way because you're talking about younger players there, but contractually speaking, he's here for the long haul. Those are the guys you want to see perform well. And I don't have much faith that Chris Davis is going to break out of this and be the Chris Davis of old, but to your point, if he can at least get himself into the low 200s and hit 25 home runs this year, then you're getting something. It's not what you paid for whatsoever, but it's at least something. And you don't want to see guys that either by using an optimistic outlook like Bundy or Gausman or guys like that, or because you have no other choice with Chris Davis, you want to see those guys perform. And when they don't perform, it makes the future look that much more dire, that much more uncertain. So it's nice to see Chris Davis have some decent at-bats here, and you hope to see it continue because what he's done so far, he's been one of the worst players in baseball. When you really look at it, the only thing that he's given them whatsoever has been some okay defense at first base. He saved Jonathan Scopenair at one point on Wednesday night, but they didn't pay him $161 million to just give them some defense and little else.
Well, I mean, that would be where you're going to bat him in the order. I mean,
sure.
Can he get hot? I think he's shot, by the way, right? So, I'll say that. But can he have a weekend where he hits 4 home runs and helps you win a game or two? Okay, yeah. But in a year when you're going to win 60 whatever or 50 whatever games, I don't even know that matters. The amount of money you're spending would be for the Angelos family, because that's where it's going to be. Because I think on a baseball basis, if you just went to the ballpark and you just saw him play this year, you would send him to the minor leagues or you would release him, right? There would be no conversation here from other than a money standpoint, not from a baseball standpoint. From a baseball standpoint, you would move on from him in a heartbeat. You would, right?
Yeah, I don't know if they would have moved on from him just yet, but they put it this way: he'd be sitting on the bench. They'd probably be coming up with some kind of an injury, some kind of a scenario to get him to the minor leagues for some rehab at bats. But this is something that they're just going to have to deal with to the best of their ability. And you hope that he has some spells where he hits better. It's again, they're not cutting him now. Any notion of trading him is
it's laughable. I see it, and I think to myself, that's a person I'm not getting into a conversation with on Twitter, and that's a person that I'm glad's not calling my show anymore, because I don't know what – I would have to call you an idiot if you called me and said that we should trade Chris Davis. It's not even in my vernacular to have those conversations anymore. But I do now that the Oriole buzz is back, it boggles my mind sometimes the fans, the things that are said, along the lines of football as well. But
you have it you have this in every fan.
But the Chris Davis thing, the reality of that, and the gravity of that for this franchise over the next 5 to 7 years, in that They're going to cry poor. They're going to be poor. There's no more mass and money train coming. Daddy's going to die. They're going to owe the Nationals hundreds of millions of dollars before all this is over with. And now the speculation begins with smart guys like Marty Conway that they might be losing money again all of a sudden as an organization because no one's coming to the ballpark. Nobody's spending money. There are no skyboxes sold. There's no media revenue around the team. And the mass and money is diminishing. Not tremendously, but on a bone-on-bone basis, Luke, they've tried to operate this team as a break-even, from a payroll standpoint. And they're not going to come close to breaking even this year because they're not selling tickets. So I think there are a lot of conversations to be having around here. And the Chris Davis one is really, really important, I think, because they're going to cry poor in the future. Look, the Marlins are doing it now, right? Because they don't have any money, because nothing's coming in, and the stadium looks empty. No one's poor in Major League Baseball, but when you open your payroll and you say we're going to have a 140, 100, whatever that number is going to be, right, and you lop off a third of it in 20, 21, 22 for whomever the new guy is, whether it's Brady Anderson, that's an economic reality that only you and I and our listeners can fix, right? That's the only thing that's going to fix the revenue problem is for people, citizens, to spend more money, and they spent that money on Chris Davis believing we were all going to give them money, and dude, that's how this thing got upside down with David Segui and Jeff Conine and, back at the turn of the century where Peter was really losing, like legitimately losing $50 to $75 million a year on the baseball team because no one was going. There was no revenue. There was no mass and money. There was no handout from national television in the way that it is now. And bam. So all of that, Chris Davis has really cashed in here, but this is really going to hamstring this team 2, 3, 4 years from now in a way that's unavoidable unless they have an insurance policy, literally, unless the Albert Bell insurance policy kicks in on him,
That's true, but it also, all that does is augment the need to build your farm system. And this antiquated, absurd, insane stance on not participating in the international market to any degree, to any meaningful degree, I should say. That just emphasizes my point, though. You're not rebuilding this thing by spending a bunch of money. You're rebuilding this thing by spending some money, and you don't have to. It doesn't have to make you go broke, but rebuilding your farm system and increasing your presence internationally and finding that talent. And when we look at the All-Star game every single year and see the number of players that are not from the United States, embracing that and understanding that, yes, you need to make some meaningful investments in the international market with the understanding that you might strike out on some of those guys, and you are going to strike out on some of those guys. But you know what? If you continue to remain committed to that, you're going to end up finding much more talent to put in your farm system. The dirty little secret about the Orioles farm system is they've actually drafted somewhat decently. Believe me, not saying top 5 or anything like that, but when you consider where they've been picking and kind of where their system is now, and they do have some talent, mostly a little bit lower in the minor league system right now, they've actually done an okay job drafting. The problem is it doesn't really look that way with their system overall because they don't participate in the international market. When you're trying to build a farm system with one arm tied behind your back, it becomes incredibly difficult.
Well, it's an ideology. Right. It's been the ideology of this ownership from the beginning that has really hamstrung this team because the guy who owns the team doesn't really understand the industry as well as he thinks he does because he thinks he understands everything better than everybody else. Just go back and listen to the tapes. It's an outlandish. I would call it a racist. That's what I would call it. That when you're saying we're going to lock off this part of the world because we don't want those players here. Boy, that's a really, it's a frightening thing, but it's also hamstrung this organization. They also got thrown out of Korea, as we famously remember, too. They did some dirty scouting across the pond as well.
I don't know how much of it's racist. I'm uncomfortable.
I'll call it what it is.
You can call it that if you want.
I
think it's much more aversion to, it's risk aversion more than anything else. I think it's much more a sense of why are we going to give money to a 16-year-old who's at best 4 or 5 years away when I can give money to what's considered at least a little bit more of a known commodity in the amateur draft. That
I'll walk it back from racist and call it nationalist, okay? Because I know the ideology of the owner and saying it's not American, we don't want it around here. That's more of what it is. I'll walk that back.
But I just think it's just such a short-sighted, bad policy. I mean, it's akin to the Ravens saying, we're gonna build our roster through the draft, but we're not going to spend any money on free agency, or vice versa.
Or we're not going to sign any kid from a small school because we just don't like small schools, and that's that.
It's really just cutting yourself off at the knees, trying to build the best farm system you can build. And to your point, as far as some of the potential financial challenges, and let's face it, are they going to get some more people to come to the ballpark when school lets out? Yeah, sure. Does that mean they're going to get 40,000 on every night? Heck no. I think we all know that. Even if this team was playing at a much higher level, you weren't going to see that most likely. So you need to continue to do things like letting kids in free, having promotions, all those different things, ticket deals. Those are the types of things you need to work harder to do, in the same way that the Ravens have had to work harder and put their individual game tickets on sale in April rather than July or August like they always did in the past. But, and this is where you just have to have the commitment to put as much sweat equity into it, as much as, yeah, you got to spend money as well, but you need to build a farm system. This isn't going to be something where, and my biggest fear is they trade off Manny Machado, they trade off Brad Brock, they trade off Zach Britton, they see if they can get something for Adam Jones, and then they go into next offseason saying, well, you know what? We still have a lot of these guys that have track records, and we're going to make another run at it. And I don't know who the free agent would be that they would sign. And, they'd have some money because there would be some substantial money coming off the books. But I think that kind of a mindset, which is what I fear they're going to have, is getting them back into the dark ages mode of, you're building a team to try to win 78 games, and that's insanity, and that's not where you want to be. So I'm much more of the thought of tearing this thing down dramatically and then starting anew with one of the top priorities being to tap into the international market to a much, much, much greater degree than they've had over the last 15 to 20 years.
He is Luke Jones. He's Luke at WNST.net as well as Baltimore Luke. Many really silly notions have come out of this family over 25 years. The international signing thing and saying we don't want those players it's outrageous. It really is. But, I don't know what the future holds here in the coming weeks, but I know once or twice a week they're going to win a ball game, and we're going to feel good about it. There's going to be there's going to be a streak at some point. I mean, and I even said that about Chris Davis. I mean, I think he's going to hit the ball really well for a week or two because that's kind of where it is. And when that happens, it'll get his average up to 215, and it won't look so horrific. Remember, Machado, really struggled for long stretches last year, right? And struggled with that and became fixed to some degree. We don't think about that. We're a year removed from that. When he's hitting 350, you think all is well. With Chris Davis, you just want him to look like a Major League Baseball player. And the only way that's going to happen is to keep marching him out there, I guess, right? It's the only way he can fix himself, making $25 million a year.
Right. I mean, the reality is, who do you want to play instead? I mean, it's not as though they have another Trey Mancini sitting on the bench. That's just where they are right now. I mean, this team has, 5 or 6 players who are legitimately first base DH types. So you're going to run them out there. And, to your larger point, this team's going to win some games. And for those baseball lifers who can't resist tuning in on at least a mostly nightly basis, enjoy the times they win. I mean, they're going to win some games.
Well, we're going to sit around and give them hours of our lives between 7 and 11 p.m. on weeknights and weekends around here. I'm still watching, and I don't even know why, dude. Like, I really...
It's what you do as a baseball fan. I mean, it's just the truth. And, yeah, sure, if there's a national game, an MLB network game between the Yankees and the Red Sox on TV, you might check that out a little bit more because it is really compelling. By the way, those two teams had a heck of a game on Wednesday night. Sounded like it was a playoff atmosphere in May. But besides the point, if you love baseball, you're not turning away from it entirely. you're certainly not going to plan your life around the Orioles in the same way that you might when they're winning 93 games like they were a few years back. But it is what it is, and I think everyone's waiting for some semblance of change, whether that's someone being fired, someone resigning, roster moves being made. Chris Tillman, could this be his last start? I don't know. Anthony Santander's Rule 5 status expires in a couple of days.
Dude, that's the one thing that really kind of pisses me off is watching the Santanders and the Valencias and the Gentrys. And no offense to your buddy Caleb Joseph, who to me is not a Major League Baseball player. Watching these just watching bad players, not young players that we're looking, not Mancini, not the next guy, or not even the next version of Tyler or whatever, or Mike Wright, or some kid that's going to come up, but just watching a tired act for me. And I'll even feel that way about Cashner, by the end of the year. By the time we get around to July and August, I'm like, all right, he's giving them a chance to win. They're 31-58 or whatever. I don't know what that difference is. Why not bring some kid from Bowie up here and see whether, he can get somebody out? I don't – that's how I'm going to feel about it now that we've quit on it, literally, before it's began. You're right. We didn't really have a season, so now we're in this May period where there is no season. The really good teams have run away in the Yankees and Red Sox. There's no more race. There's no more anything other than – how about next year? What's going to make you better next year? And watching most of the guys on this team, there might be 5 players on this team that I would want to see on this team next year. Literally 5. Like, Scope's going to be here. Trumbo's got a contract, right? So Davis got a contract. I guess Bundy, Gaussman, that's 5. And then beyond that, the Blyers.
And Cobb.
Okay. Cashner, that's right, Cashner and Cobb. Okay, so... beyond that, and what they do this year doesn't matter. I just don't want Cobb to get hurt.
Right.
I don't want Cobb to need Tommy John and miss next year. So part of that for me is the rest of these guys are completely, disposable in every way because you're never going to win with Danny Valencia third base. That's my opinion.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with that. I mean, I think some of the names you mentioned in there, Anthony Santander is actually an example of a young player who does have some potential. Now, does he need to go back down to the minors? Yeah.
They thought Nestor Cortez had potential 6 weeks ago, too. Well, and they made me believe it because of his first name.
Anthony Santander, at least to me, looks like he could be a maybe one day. Nestor Cortez never had any. I still don't understand that. I mean, this fascination with a guy that at best is going to be a 6-starter swingman out of your bullpen, and how you thought you were going to try to stash him. Well, they did it with T.J. McFarland 5 years ago, and you saw what kind of upside they got out of that. None. So, but that aside,
the fascination with the Rule 5 thing's right up there with the policies about international players. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense to anyone,
Sure, but
no one has made an argument that you should have opening day with 3 Rule 5 players on your roster and call yourself a contender and have $25 million, DHs hanging around. It is what it is. It's 9 and whatever the hell it is, and it's probably what it deserves to be, really.
Yeah, but I'll also say this. That's not the biggest reason why they're 9-27 right now. I mean, the biggest reason they're 9-27 is because everything's been bad. Including
the ownership's
plenty of individuals that you're paying a lot of money to. Everything has been bad, other than Manny Machado and a couple other individuals. Richard Blyer, who's been one of the best relievers in baseball, it's a shame that this team has been as bad as it's been because Richard Blyer is actually a really fascinating story. I mean, this guy doesn't strike anyone out, but you look at the ground ball rate, the bad contact, all of that. He could end up being their all-star representative.
I was going to say, my wife and I got some tickets on Wednesday night for the All-Star game, and he might be the guy.
Yeah, because we're working under the assumption that Machado would be dealt at that point, which we don't know, but if he is...
On or around July 17th.
Yeah, obviously he's not going to be their all-star rep if he's dealt prior to then. So if it's not Richard Blyer, who is it then? I'd say there's actually a decent chance that he ends up being their all-star rep, which is crazy, which says a lot about the rest of the team, but it also says a lot about how good he's been because, my goodness, he has a 0.4 ERA right now, yet he only strikes out 4 batters per 9 innings. It is the antithesis of what we typically see out of a bullpen in 2018, but he has really done a good job even going back to last year for the Orioles.
Well, it feels like he pitches every night, too. It feels like he's going to make 90 appearances this year, right?
Yeah, it really does. I think he is at 17 right now, which isn't extraordinary, but it does lead the club. But 17, and over those 17 appearances, 22 and 2/3 innings. So he's been a guy, like was the case on Wednesday night, has been able to give them multiple innings. And again, there's been so much bad that we've focused on. It's a shame that Richard Blyer's kind of been overlooked because he's not the reason that this team is 9-27. That's for sure. And
don't worry, Rocky Bleier will bring it up when we see him at the Super Bowl next year. Right?
And if they didn't have Richard Bleier, who knows? They might even be in 6th place. I don't know.
5th place, and don't ever refer to it as anything other than that, or you'll never get a job at Masson. He is Luke Jones, Baltimore Luke, out on Twitter, and of course at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. Anything on the Ravens you want to say at all? I mean, it's a little quiet right now. That's good, right?
Yeah. OTAs will start next week, and they'll provide media access 1 day a week for those 3 weeks, and then we get into mandatory minicamp coming up in mid-June. But, yeah, this is kind of another lull period. I mean, the teams at the facility, they're in phase 2 of the off-season workout program right now, so it's not as though there isn't anything happening, but from a media access standpoint, not a whole lot. Did see Austin Howard got a job on I guess not official, but came to terms Wednesday.
Indianapolis.
Yeah, with Indianapolis, and you figured he'd get a job at some point. I mean, he did a rock-solid job for them last year. I mean, that's still, it turned out okay, I suppose, if Orlando Brown can play, and if the competition between him and James Hurst, that's anticipated at right tackle. If one answer emerges there, then letting go of Austin Howard was okay, but he did a pretty nice solid job for them last year, and he finds some work, and we're still, kind of looking over they made a couple, back of the roster moves with some tryout guys. They cut a couple rookie free agents, so you see that kind of roster movement. Probably see roster moves 2 or 3 times a week over this time of year, but we'll really start to see this thing start to get a little more context starting next week, and definitely be looking at what this football team's going to look like in 2018. It's sure going to be interesting with the Joe Flacco, Lamar Jackson conversation topping the list, and that's not going to go away anytime.
And that is not going away. I mean, we'll always have that. If the Caps get eliminated in 4 here, and by the way, I'll be in Tampa all weekend with the Caps, and very convenient because my mother-in-law lives down there. My wife gets to see her mother-in-law. We didn't realize it's Mother's Day, so you know what? I hope you remember it's Mother's Day, Luke. So be nice to your mom on Sunday, all right?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go to a little family thing rather than watch the Orioles try to win their maybe 10th or 11th game of the season. Who knows? But yeah, happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there. Should be a
my poor mom is gone, and not a minute too early to miss this Oriole season here for Mother's Day. So, but it was my first Mother's Day without my mom, so it'll be a weird, wild one with the Bolts and the Caps all weekend long. We got you in the loop. We got horse racing. We're going to be doing a ton of Preakness around here next week. Luke's going to be at the ballpark all next week with the Phillies come in on Tuesday and Wednesday as well. We got the OTAs happening here. The Caps are involved. I'm wearing my Courage hat on my Facebook Live, on my YouTube WNST TV channel. All of it brought to you by our friends at Cole Roofing and Pfister Energy. Bill Cole's out in the BuyAToyota.com audio vault yapping about all things Ravens and Lamar and Flacco, and we always have fun talking sports here with Bill Cole. They do a great job with commercial roofing, corporate roof space. It's getting a little hotter out there. Don't let it goof on your roof. Get somebody up there who knows what they're doing. Cole Roofing, Pfister Energy there. Also, Howard Bank. A relentless commitment to being the best at every single thing they do. Every person at Howard Bank is empowered to help you. Get on out, see the new Howard Bank locations. They are popping up. I drive around. I'm like, oh, there's a Howard Bank there. I was actually in Howard County the other day and saw Howard Bank, but they're in Baltimore County. They're all over Towson, Dundalk. They're everywhere. HowardBank.com. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, in the Rofo Arena, of course, the home to the Baltimore Brigade. May 25th, Ron Jaworski bringing the Philadelphia Soul back down here. I've got my Brigade hat out. I've been wearing that around. Randy Hippert's going to join us next week as well before the Preakness. So a little bye week this week for the Brigade. They get back after it at the Royal Farms Arena on the 25th. Learn more at BaltimoreBrigade.com as well as at the Monumental Sports app. Speaking of Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, I'm down to my final sips of my Kona blend in here. I'm going to be firing up that dark Brazilian roast the first chance I get. I haven't been in a ROFO in the morning because I do a lot of radio in the morning, but I gas up in the afternoon. So, you don't want to caffeinate me in the afternoon at ROFO. I'm using the app. You get the points when you pump the gas. I pump my gas down at Key Highway most of the time. Sometimes you'll see me on Joppa Road, though. I'm up in Towson once in a while, but I get my gas at Royal Farms. I use the app. You should use the app, too. You get your fried chicken, your Western fries for free. Justin Tucker would appreciate that, too. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, and everything we do appears in the morning newspaper each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all courtesy of our friends at Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. You get all the headlines, all the news, the WNST morning newspaper, also featuring those Pimlico entries for this weekend. Yes, they're back at Old Hilltop. Hi-ho, Pimlico. I'll be at Pimlico next Saturday. Also Thursday morning, the Alibi Breakfast. And if you want a tour of the barns at the Pimlico during Preakness weekend, they do daily morning tours. Go to Preakness.com to learn more about that. Take your wife out to the track and show her around the back in the barn. She'll dig it, trust me. Big winner with my wife, seeing the horses. My wife loves the ponies. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live right here on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.